What I wanted to share was just a little bit about one of the stories this week which caught my attention. And it reminded me of a church that I helped a couple of years ago. So, the incident, you may have already seen this on news. Excuse me. The incident is the Bethel pastor suspended after former student alleges sexual assault. So, in a February the 15th statement, leaders of the charismatic megachurch said they'd become aware of a video containing serious allegations of clergy sexual abuse against Pastor Ben Armstrong dating back to 2009. Excuse me. In a separate statement issued 2 days earlier, the church said that an accusation from 2008-2009 involving Ben Armstrong, who's one of their pastors, and a former BSM student had been made, and that it predated what the church described as a known moral failure in 2009. Why did this make me think of my client from a couple of years ago? Well, firstly, here's the background to that story. So the church says that it was made aware, it predated what's described as a moral failure in 2009. That moral failure involved an intern under his care who at the time was 18 years old. So that wasn't really come out in the public. It wasn't really spoken too much about the church, but this wasn't as in a pastor having an affair with a woman. This was a pastor taking advantage of an 18-year-old girl. Allegations were made. He repented. He was taken off. Yada, yada, yada. Disappeared for a year. Anyway, here's why it reminded me of one of my clients. So this new allegation predated what happened to him in 2009 with his 18-year-old intern. One of my clients is a Christian nonprofit that works with both young men and women as teenagers. What had happened, the backstory, is that one of the young boys used Snapchat and his mum had some type of filter on Snapchat so that she could go in and see his messages. I'm not a Snapchat, but I thought it was still at the point where everything disappeared and it couldn't be seen. Apparently that is not the case. Now you can actually have it so that you can see the messages. So anyway, his mum hadn't looked for many months. She looked at his phone. Her son was 13 at the time, and she found messages from one of the youth ministers who was 33 years old. Very highly inappropriate conversations between a grown man and a young teenager. They'd gone to a concert, and this 33-year-old had bought tickets for the boy to go to a concert. She found out through a series of messages at some point there'd been some type of sleepover in a hotel with her son, other young teenagers, and this youth minister. So we did an employee investigation for this organization, had all our findings, and shared it with the police, and they said, clearly this guy is on the pathway to violence, but as yet he hasn't broken any laws. And we're like, you're joking, he's clearly on the pathway to violence. What is going on here? But at that point, law enforcement said they didn't have enough. But we interviewed 4 or 5 boys around their relationships with this 33-year-old, and it was pretty clear, taking the common sense approach, that this guy was grooming these young men in some way. But what happened is that he resigned before the organization could take any action against him. And then the attorney representing the organization said, you know, you found out what's happened. You got all the information. Well done to Simon and his team. Let's shut up shop. And I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, what if there's other victims out there that we haven't found? And then the church's response, really guided by their attorney, was, okay, well, he's resigned now. He's no longer here. You've done your investigation. There was no sexual misconduct, but clearly there was a relationship forming. And my view was, a sexual abuser does it like 160 times before they're caught. There could be other victims out there, but the church didn't want to find out if there are other victims out there. The church didn't want us to pursue it. So why this story caught my attention was it reminded me, I wonder if Bethel Church was very similar. The allegation in 2009, moral failure is what the church said. When you say moral failure, I'm assuming maybe the pastor had an affair. Yeah. But it was an affair with an 18-year-old intern under his care. So a slightly different dynamic, right? If we've got this pastor who's sort of in his late 30s, I believe he was at that point. So what's going on here? Just made me stop to think about when we get these allegations in the church, do we often take good steps to work out, are there more victims? Do we run the risk of people coming back? Here we have now, what was that 2009, 19, was that 16 years later, 16, 17 years later, someone else has come back and said, hey, me too. And perhaps it was because Bethel didn't do enough deep dive research to actually ascertain were there other victims out there. And I understand their predicament because I've been through it with one of my clients, where one of my clients didn't really want to pursue it. They knew and understood what this guy had done. He had resigned, so let him move on. So that was the first point I wanted to sort of make from this. Well, some other interesting things then that caught my attention in this article was, well, how was this new allegation made? And the news agency, I guess, that you'd call them, called Premier, they said they reviewed the YouTube video in which the victim, identified as Sarah, alleges that Armstrong manipulated, groomed, and sexually abused her. So we've got the 2009 with the intern, the 18-year-old. This is an incident which predates that. She was on a podcast, a YouTube podcast, when she decided to tell the entire world what had happened. Well, I'm an old-fashioned guy, I'm an old-fashioned British detective. You do a hard day's work for a hard day's pay. I'm a bit surprised, perhaps, that law enforcement weren't the first port of call here. Maybe she felt that she wouldn't be listened to. Maybe she felt that she wouldn't be heard. Maybe if this is true, and there's enough here to say that a leopard perhaps didn't change his spots, to say maybe it is. Maybe she's angry, frustrated, annoyed with the church for not taking action, or annoyed that they didn't come back and try and find her. Maybe the church have taken reasonable steps. But her platform was YouTube. Her platform was on like a video podcast. What does that mean for us in the church? Well, how do we deal with that crisis? Do we have a crisis communication plan? Do we have a public information officer, PIO? Are we going to address these concerns on social media? Are we not? What does it look like? The time to think about that is maybe before it's happened. Why? I don't know. I'm guessing here, but I imagine this has been viewed tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of times now, because this is a high-profile church with a guy who's already had moral failure with an 18-year-old. They didn't say that. They just said it's moral failure. He's disappearing for years, an 18-year-old intern under his care. Now we've got this other allegation. So just interesting on the platform. What do we take away from it? What we take away from it is, how would we respond in our church? Do we respond to it? What does that look like? So have a think about that question. Something else which sort of caught my attention. Let me go through to one more here. Where's the one I'm trying to find? Oh yeah, here it is. So this is what I found interesting as well, which this is what I had with my Christian organization. It said Bethel added that it's actively engaging outside counsel and independent experts to help ensure thorough, impartial, and trauma-informed processes and care. Let me say it again. Bethel added that it is actively engaging outside counsel and independent experts to help ensure thorough, impartial, and trauma informed processes and care. What does that even mean? As a security practitioner, I'm 47 years old now. I've been in safety and security since 19 as a young police officer in England. What does that mean? They're shutting up shop again. They're getting an attorney. What I don't read in that article is, well, we're cooperating with a local law enforcement and any information that they need, any records we're going to share. They say is actively engaging outside counsel and independent experts to ensure a thorough, impartial, and trauma informed processes. I would expect them to say we're cooperating with local law enforcement through their investigation. We have shared what we know with local law enforcement to assist their investigation. Often, guys, often on these church cases, listen to the language. The language is really important. Words really matter here. Actively engaging outside counsel and independent experts. Why are they doing that? I have to surmise and say they're doing it because they're now trying to do the crisis management and tactical retreat here. So super interesting. I will pop the link to this news article below. Like I said, every Monday we have our church crime watch that comes out as a PDF document. I just pick up interesting stories that I read through and I'm going to come in and share them with you. So I'll drop the link where you can read it. But as always, they're my views and opinions. What are your some of views and opinions? Read the article, listen to some of the things that I've said. Would love to get your views and opinions. But for now, you stay safe, have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.